And guys, we're taking a look at some of the top trending stories of the day, and we're starting with the Spotify. Joe Rogan is signing a new deal with the audio streaming giant. The Wall Street Journal saying it's valued at up to $250 million, which would be more than his prior deal, which was rumored at around $200 million. But what's even more interesting to me is that through this deal, Spotify is going to distribute the podcast to other platforms. So that includes Apple. It includes YouTube, which is going to actually house the video portion of Joe Rogan's podcast. And before, this was a Spotify exclusive. So now we're seeing Spotify really look at all of their podcast deals. They made a ton of heavy investments. They've been pulling back on some of those investments in the name of profitability. And now they're trying to maximize the audience, but also the ad sales, right? That's really what they're going for here. So interesting to see the economics of podcasting sort of shift.
Yeah.
I still think they're important. I still think people listen to them. But Spotify taking a different approach here.
I think that Spotify made such a big play a few years ago, and now, like you said, sort of pulling back a bit.
$1 billion. That's how much they invested.
Wow.
Crazy.
What year was that? That was a big...
It was over the course of 4 years, but it really hit their margins, and that was something that investors didn't want to keep seeing. And then we had Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, really focusing on a year of efficiency. And part of that was scaling back the podcast business. And now you're seeing the renegotiation of some of these deals, not just Rogan, but also Alexandra Cooper's Call Her Daddy podcast as well. That's receiving wide distribution.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that when they went all in on podcasts a couple of years ago, really, really big deals for the content creators. And we had thought about how the comparisons to like the Howard Sterns of the world and people like that, exclusive, locking up deals, can they monetize? And apparently they're not really doing the best job monetizing it, so they want to kind of go broader, open up that licensing to other areas, which I think is what the YouTube deal, Apple podcast makes sense, But it kind of makes me think about, what about that, like the Patreon model, right? What about stuff like where people like Tim Ferriss, who I follow a lot, he's fully solo. There's no deal. He's not using Spotify to license his content to. They're selling ads basically. It's a music business and they're selling ads. It's kind of weird, right? But I have to wonder, can you have a big enough audience? Do you need to do the Spotify deal? If you're Joe Rogan, can you just go on your own?
You probably could. I mean, he has such a big following. Yeah. But then again, it's nice to have the backing of a company like Spotify. Especially if they're going to distribute it for you and get the money up front.
And I think it'll be really interesting to see how much Spotify leans into these very specific characters, personalities in the next few years. So that's something I'm watching out for.
And that's a big point, Brooke, because I think they want to have the big stars.
Yeah.